In a city that never stops moving, some cries for help are silent. Officer Elias Thorne was a man who believed he'd seen every trick, every tragedy, and every plea the streets had to offer. But he had never seen this. A tiny Rottweiler puppy, alone and desperate, wasn't begging for a scrap of food or a pat on the head. He was begging for a miracle. Little did Elias know, following this praying pup would force him to confront the very heart he thought he'd locked away years ago. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. And truly, I am curious. Where in the world are you watching from? We love to see how far our stories travel. Drop your location in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Elias reached for his radio, muscle memory kicking in. Dispatch, this is Thorne. I've got a stray puppy at the corner of 5th and Marion. Requesting animal control for pickup. The response crackled back immediately. Copy that, Thorne. Animal control is responding to a multi-dog situation on the west side. ETA 45 minutes to your location. 45 minutes. Elias looked down at the Rottweiler puppy, who hadn't moved an inch. Sorry, buddy. You're gonna have to wait. Before he could finish, the puppy lunged forward and clamped his tiny teeth onto Elias's pant leg. Not biting, not aggressive. Just holding on with surprising determination. The pup began to pull, backing up with his whole body straining against the fabric. Whoa, hey. Elias tried to gently shake his leg free, but Jax only pulled harder, a soft whine escaping his throat. Those amber eyes never left Elias's face, pleading with an intensity that seemed almost human. Elias had worked the streets long enough to read body language, and everything about this animal screamed urgency. This wasn't the behavior of a lost pet or a hungry stray. This was something else entirely. Jax released his grip, took 3 deliberate steps toward the narrow alley between the precinct and the adjacent building, then stopped. He looked back at Elias, waiting. You've got to be kidding me, Elias muttered. But Jax didn't move. He just sat there, tail low, eyes fixed on the officer with that same desperate intensity. Against every bit of protocol screaming in his head, Elias took a step toward the alley. Jax immediately turned and trotted several feet into the shadows, then stopped again, looking back. Elias pulled out his phone, checking the time. His shift had ended 20 minutes ago. He should be heading home, leaving this for animal control. But something in those eyes. This is insane, he said to no one in particular. He keyed his radio again. Dispatch, Thorne. I'm going to attempt to contain the stray until animal control arrives. I'll be off radio for a few minutes. Copy, Thorne. Stay safe. Safe. Elias looked down the alley where Jax waited in a shaft of fading sunlight. The narrow passage was littered with debris, leading toward the industrial district, a maze of abandoned warehouses and construction sites that most officers avoided unless absolutely necessary. Jax took another few steps, then paused, his whole body trembling with barely contained urgency. He let out a single sharp bark that echoed off the brick walls. Elias took a breath and followed, leaving the safety of the well-lit street behind. Whatever this was about, he was about to find out. The alley opened into a forgotten stretch of urban decay that locals called the Iron District. Elias had patrolled these streets for 2 decades, but he'd never ventured this deep into the industrial wasteland. Chain-link fences sagged under their own weight, their rusted metal screaming neglect. Skeletal frames of half-demolished buildings rose like broken teeth against the darkening sky. Jax didn't hesitate. The puppy squeezed through a gap in the fence that Elias had to widen with his boot, then waited on the other side, his compact body vibrating with impatience. The moment Elias cleared the opening, Jax was off again, weaving between mounds of twisted rebar and chunks of broken concrete. Slow down. Elias called, but Jax only glanced back to ensure the officer was still following before pressing forward. The terrain grew treacherous. Deep pits yawned in the earth where construction equipment had excavated and then abandoned their work. Some were filled with stagnant rainwater that reflected the fading light like dead eyes. Others descended into pure darkness, their depths unknowable. Jax navigated it all with the precision of someone who'd made this journey before. When he approached a particularly wide crater, he veered left, taking Elias around its crumbling edge. Where a pile of metal sheeting blocked the path, the puppy ducked low and scrambled underneath, then barked once, sharp and commanding, until Elias found handholds to climb over. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Elias muttered, his uniform collecting dust and rust with every movement. His duty belt caught on a piece of protruding metal, and he had to stop to carefully unhook himself. Jax paced in tight circles ahead, whining. They reached what must have once been the center of a construction site. A massive concrete foundation stretched out like a gray scar, riddled with drainage holes and covered in graffiti. Beyond it, a mountain of industrial debris created a maze of shadows and sharp edges. Jax climbed onto a fallen I-beam, using it like a bridge over a particularly nasty section of broken glass and twisted wire. He stopped halfway across and looked back at Elias, his meaning clear. "Follow exactly where I step." Elias tested the beam. It held. He moved carefully, arms out for balance, acutely aware that one wrong step could send him tumbling into the debris below. His radio crackled with static, the signal breaking up in this dead zone of metal and concrete. On the far side, Jax dropped to the ground and immediately began descending a slope of packed earth and gravel. At the bottom, Elias could make out the dark mouth of a drainage culvert, its metal grate twisted and partially collapsed. Jax stopped at its entrance and began to bark, urgent, desperate, echoing into the darkness below. Elias's heart sank as he approached. This was it. Whatever Jax had been trying to show him was down there, in that black hole that smelled of rust and stagnant water. The puppy looked up at him with those pleading amber eyes, then back into the culvert, then back to Elias again. The message couldn't be clearer. "She's down there. Please." Elias knelt at the edge of the culvert, his knees sinking into the damp gravel. The grate was a monster of old steel, its bars as thick as his wrist, streaked with rust and twisted at odd angles where something, time, force, or both, had warped it out of shape. Through the gaps, he could see nothing but darkness. Jax whined and pawed at the grate, his small claws scraping uselessly against the metal. "Easy, buddy. Let me listen." Elias pressed his face close to the opening, straining to hear over the ambient hum of distant traffic and the whisper of wind through the debris field. At first, there was nothing. Then it came, a sound so faint he almost missed it. A low, rhythmic whimpering, exhausted and broken, rising from somewhere deep in the culvert. The sound of suffering. "Hey!" Elias called down into the darkness. "Anyone down there?" The whimpering stopped for a heartbeat, then resumed with renewed urgency. Not human. Animal. And unmistakably desperate. Elias pulled his flashlight from his belt and angled it through the grate. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a nightmare of concrete and water. The culvert descended at a steep angle, its walls slick with moss and grime. About 15 feet down, the passage leveled out, and there, his breath caught. A Rottweiler lay on her side in several inches of murky water, her tan markings matted with mud. A heavy metal beam, probably fallen from the construction work above, had collapsed across her hindquarters, pinning her in place. She lifted her head weakly when the light hit her, and Elias saw the intelligence in those dark eyes. The plea. "Oh God," he breathed. Jax barked sharply, as if to say, "I told you so." Elias aimed the flashlight lower and felt his stomach drop. Water was trickling into the culvert from somewhere deeper in the drainage system, a steady flow that was already rising. It lapped at the mother dog's ribs, and even in the few seconds he watched, it climbed a fraction higher. The tide was coming in, not from any ocean, but from the network of storm drains that crisscrossed the city. Somewhere, miles away, it must have started raining. The water would funnel through the system, channeling into this exact spot. He had minutes, maybe an hour at most, before the culvert would be completely flooded. The mother Rottweiler whimpered again, trying to shift under the beam. Her efforts were feeble, her strength clearly spent. How long had she been down there? Hours? Days? Jax pressed against Elias's leg, trembling. The puppy looked up at him with an expression that transcended species. Pure, desperate hope. Elias grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Thorn. I need fire and rescue at my location immediately. I've got an animal trapped in a drainage culvert at the Old Iron District site, water rising. Also advising possible structural collapse hazard." Static crackled. "Thorn, we're not reading your location clearly. Can you repeat?" He looked at his phone. No signal. The metal and concrete were blocking everything. He was on his own. Elias moved to higher ground, scrambling up a mound of debris until his radio crackled back to life. "Dispatch, Thorn. Do you copy?" "Copy, Thorn. Fire and rescue are en route to the Iron District. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Elias looked back at the culvert where Jax sat vigil, then down at the rising water visible through the grate. 10 minutes might as well be 10 hours. "Dispatch, be advised the situation is critical. Water is rising rapidly. I'm going in." A pause. "Thorn. Negative. Wait for rescue personnel." "That's an order." Elias stared at the radio in his hand. 20 years on the force. 20 years of following protocol, of doing things by the book, of keeping his head down and his emotions in check. 20 years of telling himself that getting involved, really involved, would only break him. He clicked off the radio. At the culvert's edge, he began stripping his gear. The tactical vest came off first, heavy with equipment and body armor. Then his duty belt with its radio, gun, handcuffs, and baton. 40 pounds of responsibility that suddenly felt like chains. Jax watched him with those amber eyes, head tilted. "Listen up," Elias said, kneeling to the puppy's level. He arranged his gear in a neat pile. "You guard this, understand? Don't let anyone touch it." Jax sat immediately, his small body going rigid with purpose. It was absurd, trusting a 3-month-old puppy to guard police equipment worth thousands of dollars. But something in the way Jax looked at him suggested the puppy understood exactly what was being asked. Elias kept only his flashlight and multi-tool. The grate was partially dislodged, and with leverage, he managed to pry it open wider, creating a gap just large enough for his body. The smell hit him immediately. Stagnant water, rust, and decay. He swung his legs into the opening, found a foothold on the slick concrete, and began his descent. The walls were treacherous, covered in algae and years of accumulated grime. His fingers scraped for purchase on anything solid. A crack, a pipe, a protruding bolt. Halfway down, his boot slipped. For one heart-stopping moment, he was in free fall. Then his hand caught an exposed rebar. The metal bit into his palm, but it held. He hung there, breathing hard, before finding his footing again. "I'm coming," he called down. "Hold on, girl." The mother dog's whimpering grew louder as he descended. When his boots finally hit the water, the cold shocked through his uniform pants. It was deeper than it had looked from above, already past his ankles and rising steadily. He swept his flashlight across the space. The culvert stretched in both directions, disappearing into darkness. But right here, where the beam had fallen, the mother Rottweiler lay trapped, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her eyes found his, and in them he saw everything. Pain, exhaustion, fear, and beneath it all, a mother's desperate will to survive. "I've got you," Elias said, wading toward her. "I've got you both." Elias crouched beside the trapped dog, his flashlight propped against the culvert wall. The beam was massive, a steel I-beam that must have weighed several 100 pounds. It had fallen at an angle, creating a brutal leverage point across the dog's hindquarters. Even in the dim light, he could see her leg was bent at an unnatural angle. "Easy, girl," he murmured, reaching out slowly. She flinched, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Her lips pulled back, revealing teeth, not in aggression, but in warning. "I'm hurt. I'm scared. Don't make me bite you." "I know," Elias said softly. "I know it hurts. But I'm here to help." He pulled back, thinking. Above him, Jax's silhouette appeared at the mouth of the culvert, backlit by the fading daylight. The puppy barked once, sharp and insistent. The car, Jack. It was still in his trunk, parked blocks away on the safe side of the Iron District. Elias looked at the rising water, now mid-shin and climbing, then at the dog's labored breathing. He didn't have time to go back. Unless... "Jax," he called up. "I need you to do something for me, buddy. I need my Jack." From the car. "Can you?" He stopped. He was talking to a puppy. A 3-month-old puppy who, despite his remarkable intelligence, couldn't possibly understand. Jax disappeared from view. Elias stood in the cold water, alone with the dying dog, and wondered if he'd just lost his only chance. But 3 minutes later, 3 impossibly long minutes, he heard the scrape of metal on concrete. Jax reappeared at the opening, and behind him, being dragged by an older man in a maintenance uniform, was Elias's hydraulic jack. "Officer," the man called down. "Your little friend here wouldn't leave me alone. Kept barking and pulling at my pants until I followed him to your car. The trunk was open. Figured you needed this." "Yes." "Lower it down." They rigged a rope, and the jack descended into the darkness. Elias grabbed it, his hands shaking with cold and adrenaline. He positioned the jack under the beam, as close to the pivot point as he could manage. The water was at his knees now. The mother dog's whimpering had grown quieter. Not a good sign. "Okay, girl." "Bella," he said, surprising himself with the name. "This is going to hurt, but I need you to trust me. When this lifts, you need to pull yourself free. Understand?" Her dark eyes met his. He could swear she nodded. Elias began to pump. The jack extended slowly, agonizingly. The beam groaned, resisting, then finally began to rise. 1 inch. 2 inches. Bella whined, a sound of pure agony, but she understood. Her front leg scrabbled for purchase on the slick concrete. She pulled, dragging her injured body forward even as Elias held the beam aloft with shaking arms. Above them, Jax barked frantically. Encouragement, celebration, desperation all mixed together. "Come on," Elias grunted. "Come on, Bella." Almost there. With a final surge of strength, she pulled herself clear. The beam slipped from the jack and crashed back down with a thunderous clang that echoed through the culvert. But Bella was free. The water answered with a roar. Somewhere deep in the storm drain system, a dam broke, or a pipe burst, or the rain simply overwhelmed the capacity. Whatever the cause, the effect was immediate and terrifying. Water surged into the culvert with violent force, transforming the gentle trickle into a churning torrent. "Go!" Elias shouted to Bella, but she couldn't. Her injured leg buckled when she tried to stand, and she collapsed back into the rising water with a yelp of pain. The water was at his thighs now, the current pulling at his legs with shocking strength. In seconds it would be too deep, too fast. They would both drown down here in the dark. Elias made a choice. He bent down and slid his arms under Bella's body, one hand beneath her chest, the other supporting her hindquarters. She was dead weight, 80 pounds of muscle, bone, and soaking wet fur. She tensed, a warning growl vibrating through her body, but she didn't bite. Some instinct told her this was survival. "I've got you," Elias grunted, straightening with her in his arms. His back screamed in protest. His legs trembled. But he moved. The water was waist-deep when he reached the culvert wall. Above him, the opening seemed impossibly far away. He'd climbed down, but climbing up while carrying an injured dog? The physics seemed impossible. Elias. The maintenance worker's face appeared at the opening. Ropes coming down. The line splashed into the water beside him. Elias grabbed it with one hand, keeping Bella secured with the other. "I need you to pull. On 3. He wrapped the rope around his wrist, positioned Bella as high on his chest as he could manage, and began to climb. His boots slipped on the algae-covered wall. His shoulders burned. The water grabbed at his legs, trying to drag him back down. But he climbed. Bella's claws dug into his uniform, holding on with what little strength she had left. Her warm breath came in rapid pants against his neck. Above them, the maintenance worker pulled, and Jax's excited barking echoed down like a lifeline of hope. Halfway up, Elias's boot found a good hold, the same exposed rebar that had saved him on the way down. He pushed with everything he had, his legs driving them upward as his free hand clawed for the next grip. The water roared below them, filling the culvert with terrifying speed. 10 feet. 8 feet. 6. "Almost there," the worker called. Elias's hand broke through the opening into cool evening air. The worker grabbed his wrist, hauling with surprising strength. Elias pushed Bella up and out first, and hands pulled her to safety. Then it was his turn. He scrambled up the last few feet, his muscles spent, and collapsed onto solid ground just as the water below crested at the opening. Jax was on him immediately, licking his face, his whole body wiggling with joy. The puppy ran between Elias and Bella, yipping and dancing, his tail a blur of happiness. Elias lay on his back, gasping, and started to laugh. They'd made it. Against every odd, they'd actually made it.